just what you've room for. Simply adopt the right approach, and you will end up with room for all you want. The more the mind takes in, the more it expands. I remember a piece of advice which Attalus gave me in the days when I practically laid siege to his lecture hall, always first to arrive and last to go, and would draw him into a discussion of some point or other, even when he was out taking a walk, for he was always readily available to his students, not just accessible. A person teaching and a person learning, he said, should have the same end in view, the improvement of the latter. A person who goes to a philosopher should carry away with him something or other of value every day. He should return home a sounder man, or at least more capable of becoming one. And he will, for the power of philosophy is such that she helps not only those who devote themselves to her, but also those who come into contact with her. A person going out into the sun, whether or not this is what he is going out for, will acquire a tan. Customers who sit around rather too long in a shop selling perfumes carry the scent of the place away with them. And people who have been with a philosopher are bound to have derived from it something of benefit even to the inattentive. Note that I say inattentive, not the hostile. That's all very well, but don't we all know certain people who have sat at a philosopher's feet year after year without acquiring even a semblance of wisdom? Of course I do. Persevering, conscientious people, too. I prefer to call them a philosopher's squatters, not students. Some come not to learn, but just to hear him, in the same way as we're drawn to a theatre for the sake of entertainment, to treat our ears to a play or music or an address. You'll find that a large proportion of the philosopher's audience is made up of this element, which regards his lecture hall as a place of lodging for periods of leisure. They're not concerned to rid themselves of any faults there or acquire any rule of life by which to test their characters, but simply to enjoy to the full the pleasures the ear has to offer. Admittedly, some of them actually come with notebooks, but with a view to recording not the content of the lecture, but words from it, to be passed on to others with the same lack of profit to the hearer as they themselves derived from hearing them. Some of them are stirred by the noble sentiments they hear. Their faces and spirits light up, and they enter into the emotions of the speaker, going into a transport just like the eunuch priests who work themselves into a frenzy to order at the sound of a Phrygian flute. They are captivated and aroused not by a din of empty words, but by the splendor of the actual content of the speaker's words. Any expression of bold or spirited defiance of death or fortune, making you keen to translate what you've heard into action straight away. They are deeply affected by the words and become the persons they are told to be, or would if the impression on their minds were to last, if this magnificent enthusiasm were not immediately intercepted by that discourager of noble conduct, the crowd. Very few succeed in getting home in the same frame of mind. It is easy enough to arouse in a listener a desire for what is honourable, for in every one of us, nature has laid the foundations or sown the seeds of the virtues. We are born to them all of us. And when a person comes along with the necessary stimulus, then those qualities of the personality are awakened, so to speak, from their slumber. Haven't you noticed how the theatre murmurs agreement whenever something is spoken, the truth of which we generally recognize and unanimously confirm? The poor lack much, the greedy everything. The greedy man does no one any good, but harms no person more than his own self. Your worst miser will clap these lines and be delighted at hearing his own faults lashed in this manner. Imagine how much more likely it is that this will happen when such things are being said by a philosopher, interspersing passages of sound advice with lines of poetry calculated to deepen their hold on unenlightened minds. For the constricting requirements of verse, as Cleanthes used to say, give one's meaning all the greater force, in the same way as one's breath produces a far greater noise when it is channeled through a trumpet's long and narrow tube before its final expulsion through the widening opening at the end. The same things stated in prose are listened to with less attention and have much less impact. When a rhythm is introduced, when a fine idea is compressed into a definite meter, the very same thought comes hurtling at one like a missile launched from a fully extended arm. A lot, for example, is said about despising money. The listener is told at very considerable length that men should look on riches as consisting in the spirit and not in inherited estates, and that a man is wealthy if he has attuned himself to his restricted means and has made himself rich on little. But verses such as the following he finds a good deal more striking. He needs but little who desires but little. He has his wish whose wish can be to have what is enough. When we hear these lines and others like them, we feel impelled to admit the truth. The people for whom nothing is ever enough admire and applaud such a verse and publicly declare their distaste for money. When you see them in such a mood, keep at them and drive this home, piling it on them, having nothing to do with plays on words, syllogisms, sophistries, and all the other toys of sterile intellectual cleverness. Speak out against the love of money. Speak out against extravagance. When you see that you've achieved something and had an effect on your listeners, lay on all the harder. It's hardly believable how much can be achieved by this sort of speech, aimed at curing people, wholly directed to the good of people listening. When the character is impressionable, it is easily won over to a passion for what is noble and honourable. While a person's character is still malleable and only corrupted to a mild degree, truth strikes deep if she finds the right kind of advocate. For my part, at any rate, when I hear Attalus winding up the case against the faults of character, the mistaken attitudes and the evils generally of the lives we lead, I frequently felt a sense of the sorry plight of the human race, and looked on him as a kind of sublime being who has risen higher than the limits of human aspiration. He himself would use the Stoic term king of himself. But to me he seemed more than a king, as being a man who had the right to pass judgment on the conduct and the character of monarchs. And when he began extolling to us the virtues of poverty, and showing us how everything which went beyond our actual needs was just so much unnecessary weight, a burden to the man who had to carry it, I often had a longing to walk out of that lecture hall a poor man. When he started exposing our pleasures and commending to us, along with moderation in our diet, physical purity and a mind equally uncontaminated not only by illicit pleasures, but by unnecessary ones as well, I would become enthusiastic about keeping the appetites for food and drink firmly in their place. With the result that some of this Lucilius has lasted with me right through life.